Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord. Welcome to our guide for the produce mode S.T.E.P. So, what exactly is S.T.E.P? It's the fifth major produce mode for Shiny Colors that focuses more on the origins of sorts for characters. Stories are added on a little bit over time, usually on a per character basis, but the big thing about it is that S.T.E.P has no real narrative of its own. It's very generic in terms of its opening and ending, but all we know is that it happens immediately after Wing. So for those looking for super deep lore, you're only going to get it in small chunks every so often. Now for the purpose of this guide, we're going to be focusing on all the basics early, moving into some intermediate things, and then more advanced concepts. So feel free to jump around on the video for whatever part makes the most sense for you. I'll make sure to leave timestamps for specific sections as well. This mode is very simple at its core, but it is very demanding for high-level output. So don't be surprised if you spend both a lot of time in and out of S.T.E.P producing in order to make very powerful idols. In terms of relative strength, a well-produced S.T.E.P idol can be leaps and bounds better than basically any other produced card you can make in any other mode. It just takes a lot of work to get there. Going in, we first want to talk about supports. Obviously, since you have to bring 5 supports to any produce mode, what supports you choose to bring are very important. There's a couple things you want to keep in mind. First off, stat masteries, so things like vocal mastery vocal, dance mastery dance, so on and so forth, are not really as useful here. The reason for this is because the way that rooms scale in this mode specifically makes those abilities much worse as time progresses. In other words, the further you get into the seasons and the more you level up rooms, the less valuable these abilities become. So because of that, the only one you may want to consider bringing is S.P, as S.P is still a relatively hard stat to get in general. Now, for some abilities that are good to bring, stamina masteries. So things like unit mastery stamina, room mastery stamina, or even skills like stamina support. These abilities are all really good at keeping you in rooms consistently. Especially good if you're able to pair it up with EX skills or stay masteries, which are also a good thing to consider if you have them available, even if they are relatively new at the time of this recording, in order to help further ensure you keep having stamina to keep doing lessons. It's a really good thing, and it'll make a lot more sense once you get into the mode. Another good set are room affecting masteries. We don't really have a great term for this, but abilities like room mastery, perfect mastery, and excellent boost. Now, going in order, room mastery, when the idol has a specific cut-in happen, the room they are in is a guaranteed level up as long as no trouble occurs. So as long as you pass the lesson or whatever room, that room will level up, as long as they're in it. The same is true for perfect mastery. When this cuts in, you will have a guaranteed perfect, which doubles your stat gain in that room, as long as they're in that room and you pass it. As for excellent boost, this applies once an idol's bond, in other words the little bar above their head, goes beyond 50. An excellent increases the stats gained in a room by 20% for every excellent idol in the room. Excellent boost increases that percentage, making that effect even stronger. So anything that helps make your rooms significantly stronger outside of just a small little flat stat buff are really good to consider. Once you've decided on your supports, we then get to this window, which for any producer is going to be very new compared to any other of the produce modes. This is Knowhow. We'll go into more depth with Knowhow books in a little bit, but the basic idea is that you have to select 3 books before you can continue. When you select a book, you will come up to this window, and yours will look and vary depending on what you've been producing and who you've been producing. Every single idol has a unique Knowhow book, and they represent the quality of the idol that you produced in a previous mode. And you make these books in any produce mode, including S.T.E.P. These books can carry over abilities from those runs, which you can then bring into S.T.E.P in order to make your idol stronger. Couple things of note. As you notice, some of these are grayed out by default. This means that you can't actually bring them in. You are not allowed to use Knowhow books of idols that you are both using as your produce idol, but also as your support idol. So in this situation, we can't use something like a Kaho Knowhow because we're producing Kaho. and because we have a support like Hiyori on our team, we can't use a Hiyori book. So, a good thing to keep in mind, especially once you're getting into the process of making better know-how books, which is a thing you can do, cycling through your produce cards to choose idols that you don't necessarily plan on using later is a pretty good thing to consider. Once you've decided on your 3 books, it's time to go into producing. As you can see, this reflects the stats that you made on those previous cards. But again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Once you've selected your books, we go into the normal items page. Also, since this is also a feature that is new from the last mode we've discussed, which I believe was Landing Point, there is now a feature that allows you to essentially treat a run as multiple runs. So, you can have it count as just one single run, or you can spend additional stamina to make it count as 2 or 3 runs. This has some applications regarding know-how, but if you just want a quick way to spend stamina, this is a good way to do it. For the items, a couple ones that are good to recommend. Keychains, towels, and t-shirts all improve the odds of excellence occurring, but it also applies experience to rooms. The more bond that your supports have, the better experience they'll offer, which will make leveling up rooms a lot easier, and it's definitely worth doing if you have a lot of leveled up supports. Even if your supports aren't leveled up, just having that bonus is really good. Other items that are very good to consider are the healing tarts. Healing tarts are a good backup, substitute, or even complement to stamina masteries. Since the goal is you want to produce in lesson rooms as much as possible, if you're in a situation where the room is really good but your stamina is bad, having healing tarts are great things to keep in the back pocket of sorts. So that way, you're at no real risk for doing that room anymore. Now, there are a couple items that you can't use. For example, you cannot use the trend magazines because there are no real auditions. You also cannot use the notebook in order to learn about communes because, as it turns out, there are no communes in S.T.E.P. That also includes morning communes, which means you cannot use perfumes, nor can you use the morning toast or the memory charms. Now, lesson tickets are a good thing to have, because this will allow you to shuffle up the rooms and see if you can get a better alignment of supports in the rooms you're looking for. It's obviously not guaranteed, but it is a good item to consider. Trouble tags are sometimes good, but not as useful. Candles can sometimes be useful if you have a lot of tension mastery. This doesn't come up often, but if you need to raise up your tension after a freak accident or just want something early to happen, then bringing along a candle is a pretty good thing to do as well. The last item, which is not something we'll talk about super often, but the thank you letters. The thank you letters provide you additional memory level. The reason why this is important is because you have no morning communes as well, as we mentioned before, which means that getting memory levels are actually kind of hard. And you're gonna want items like this in order to make sure you can make something that's stronger than, say, a memory level 3. Once you've decided on the items you want to bring along, you can go ahead and jump into the mode. Getting into the nitty-gritty here, we first have the seasonal bonuses. There are 4 seasons in S.T.E.P, just like every other produce mode. The number of weeks per season vary depending. Early on, it is simply a 6-week season, which is shorter than the usual of 8. Season 2 lasts for 10 weeks, Season 3 is 14, and Season 4 is 18. There is a major performance at the end of Season 1 and Season 4. And what we're seeing right now is the recommendations to clear at the end of every season. Season 1's is just to simply pass that previously mentioned audition in Season 1. Season 2 wants us to reach 20,000 fans, Season 3 250,000, and Season 4 500,000. They all have bonuses, and if you notice, they're granting us points. These points will make sense in just a little bit, but these are great to have, as you can see, they also grant you tension, as well as points towards your memory level. So if you're seeking to build a strong center, doing these are a must. They're not always necessary, and there are some situations where skipping out on them can be an okay thing, but that takes a little more understanding of the mode to figure out when it is a good or not good thing to spend time in auditions. Otherwise, our main screen looks about the same as normal. We have our usual schedule, our coffee mug for rest, our abilities page, but also a new page that has a bunch of books known as Knowhow. Also, of course, we have our goal at the top of the screen here, and our current fan count, which is just a simple 1. Before we get into those Knowhow books, let's take a look at the, technically because of S.T.E.P, revamped page for lessons and work sites. As you can see, they are no longer now 2 tabs plus an Auditions tab. Instead, they are 1 tab with 6 areas all in a row. It used to be there was 3 at the top and 3 at the bottom, with your lessons at the top and your work sites at the bottom, or technically, I guess, in the middle. This change happened in S.T.E.P first, that was then later added to the other produce modes, if you were ever confused or came back after a long break and noticed that everything looked drastically different. Otherwise, they all function the same as they did in the past. But a very notable feature is that if you click on a room twice, or click on a room while you're already looking at it, you'll automatically do the lesson. So be very careful when clicking around on the screen so that you don't accidentally click on a lesson you don't want to do. Another thing you'll notice is that the rooms have their levels as per usual, but there's also a nice little circle around the icon representing each lesson room. This represents the experience of the room. Yes, unlike the other produce modes, S.T.E.P shows you the progress towards the next level. Now, unlike the other produce modes as well, this has a different level cap. In other produce modes, the highest level you can make a room is 5, but in S.T.E.P, the highest level is 10. The strength between a level 5 and a level 10 room is night and day, and you will quickly see that very high level rooms produce insane results in terms of stat gain. So it's always a good idea to try to level up the room that you want to use the most as much as possible. So as you can see here, there's now an EXP bit that's filled up almost all the way to level 2. So you can always keep track as to how much experience you gained in a room, which experience actually has a couple different factors. First, the EXP is determined by the level of your supports, sort of. The bond of your supports is a better way to put it. The more full the bar is above your supports, the more experience they offer in the rooms that they're in. In addition to this, your tension also affects the amount of experience that you gain, so the higher your tension, the more experience you'll gain from a room as well. And naturally, the number of supports in your room will also affect this. Each support provides experience, so stacking the supports on top of each other can yield a ton of experience. Effects like Excellent also increase the experience gain, and Perfects double the experience gain. The Room Mastery that was brought up earlier will automatically level up the room, then apply all of the experience afterwards. So not only is it a guaranteed level up, but it also carries all that experience back over. It's a really good ability if you're able to have it on your team. While we're over here, let's take a look at the auditions. As you can see, the auditions have a slight different layout than they did in the past. Now, they show you the name of the audition, which week it's in, or rather what season it's in, but it also shows you a percent with a stick figure holding his hands up. This is your success rate. This means if we take this audition, we have a 100% chance to pass, and we will gain stats in accordance to that audition. If you would like to check the further details of the audition, you can click the button at the bottom left of the screen here. This shows you a couple things, and this is actually one of the best features in S.T.E.P specifically. So as you can see, we would gain a small bump to our tension, no affection, so no points to our memory level, 2,000 fans, 10 points to vocal, and then 9 points to both dance, visual, and mental. And of course, then it shows us our chance for passing. Now, if we look at the top here, this button has the ability, when we click on it, it turns pink. This allows us to set this audition as a reminder, so that the following season, it will tell us that this audition is available that we wanted to do, and it will take us there immediately upon closing the prompt. So if there are specific auditions that you're looking out for in the weeks ahead, you can choose to set a reminder for them, so that way, while you're getting into the workflow, you don't forget to do the auditions that you plan to do when you were looking through it. You can look at up to 8 weeks in advance for auditions. So you can use this as an opportunity to check out not only what happens for the rest of this season, but also maybe check out auditions in the following season. Now, the biggest aspect to S.T.E.P as a mode specifically are these books down here. For the sake of things, we'll refer to this as the S.T.E.P shop. Now, you'll notice that when we do auditions, we're not exactly gaining stats, we're gaining points. Up above, we can see the amount of points that we've accumulated for each individual stat. So vocal, dance, visual, mental, and appeal. Otherwise SP for the end there. And what we see here are ways we can spend our points, as we can also see our idol's current stats and maximum possible stats on the bottom left. So for example, we can click on this side over here, and we can see at the bottom that our vocal has now gone up by 10 points. We can take this away, and we can showcase the side on the right here, which now increases that 550 to 560. The idea of this is that by gathering points by either participating in lessons, work sites, auditions, or those seasonal bonuses that we brought up earlier, you gather up all these points to then spend on upgrades for your idol. This first page focuses entirely on your idol's stats. The left side increases the current stats of your idol, as mentioned before, so the numbers on the upper portion. Whereas the right side increases the maximum possible stat that you can have, which is the denominator, I suppose is the best way to put it. Your numerator, denominator. You can increase all of your stats. You can also gain SP. As mentioned before, SP is relatively hard to get, so being able to gather up points for your appeal stat is very good, or if you have a surplus of dance, visual, mental, and vocal, you can spend all of those to gain SP instead. This is just the first page of 4. A very key point about these stats is that as you purchase them, if you notice, this number increased to a 1. Every 30 purchases increases the cost of each upgrade. So at the start, this will cost us 10 vocal points to gain 10 vocal. After this, once we reach 31, this will increase to 15 points for 10, then 20 points for 10, and it'll start adding on additional points like appeal in order to also purchase this stat. So, the stronger you get, the more expensive things will become, which is why gathering a ton of points at a time with higher leveled rooms is the way to go. Our second tab is passives and appeals. These are unlocked primarily from auditions. Every audition either has a reward of an appeal, a passive, or an ability. You unlock them in the shop by passing said audition, then spend points to unlock them for real. That's kind of the flow. So if there are any appeals that look appealing to you, you can choose to grab them and equip them to your idol of choice, or in this case, the idol that you're producing. Same goes for passives. If you happen to come across a passive that looks useful for your team, it's definitely worth it to spend some points to gather those up. Not always, but it can be. Now, the strength of these appeals and passives vary. Generally, in the earlier seasons, they're not going to be very strong, but as you get into the later seasons, you may come across passives and appeals that actually look very tempting. Those can be really good. So, again, using that ability to jot down which auditions look good, you can use that to take a look at some of the later auditions in that season or in the next season to decide if there's something over there you're interested in grabbing. Our third tab here is abilities. As mentioned before, you can unlock abilities from auditions, and this section may or may not be the most important place to be spending some points on outside of gaining those stats. So you can unlock abilities from auditions. You can also gain them from Knowhow. See, the Knowhow books you bring along, or rather Knowhow books you produce, can have abilities from other game modes. Those can show up here at the end of every season starting from Season 2. They, just like the appeals and passives we talked about earlier, will appear in the shop and you can purchase them for points. If you have enough points, you can unlock them, which will then apply to your idol going forward. Now, as a note, you don't have to purchase the ability for it to pass on to a future Knowhow book at the end of this run. So if you come across a bunch of abilities you want to use for later, you don't have to buy all of them. As long as they show up, you're good. Almost every single ability you get from auditions are good, and most abilities you can inherit can be good as well. We'll go into more detail about those later, but understand that they're very useful. The last tab is sort of a miscellaneous one. It provides plus 10 points to your tension, as well as plus 10 points to your memory appeal. Again, if you're building a center, that plus 10 points will be very helpful, and the tension increase is great if you're looking again for those tension masteries, or want to increase the amount of EXP that you're earning from your rooms, especially early on. Now, I forgot to mention this, but the percent chance of your auditions are actually influenced by everything in the S.T.E.P shop. Your base stats alongside passives, appeals, and abilities that you purchase will increase that percentage. So, if you find yourself in an audition that looks too daunting because the percent is too low, consider jumping into the S.T.E.P shop and purchasing abilities and passives to see if it will up your chance of success. And also, any abilities you get from your normal skill tree that you would get in any other run also apply to this percentage. So as long as you're making your idol stronger by any sort of way, it will increase your chance of passing that audition. And that is kind of it in regards to the basics for S.T.E.P. If you want a general game flow, you're going to go through all of Season 1, just building up stats and leveling up a room. Then in Seasons 2 through 4, you're juggling taking on auditions in order to reach the fan counts if that's something you want to do, or leveling up rooms in order to gain more stats, while also then building up your characters to unlock more passives, more appeals, more abilities, so on and so forth. Once you make your way to Season 4, as long as you've got the strength to do it, you can pass that final audition, and you have cleared S.T.E.P. So congratulations to you. So as mentioned before, always keep in mind that you can mark down auditions per season. You can choose to take auditions purely for fan count, which is not a bad thing. There is a bare minimum route to take in order to gain your fans. So first, we're going to go over auditions that give you good numbers of fans for an easy 500,000 fan route. In other words, to pass all of the bonuses for each season in the quickest way possible. In Season 1, you don't have to worry about any auditions, just focus on leveling up your rooms. For Season 2, however, we're gonna treat this sort of in a reverse direction, because for some, it's easier to remember it as the number of weeks you've been in versus the number of weeks you have left. For the sake of this guide, we'll be going over the number of weeks you've been in that season. So in Season 2, starting from week 4, there's an audition for 14,000 fans. In week 5, there's an identical 14,000, and in week 9, there's a 15,000. You only need to clear 2 of these in order to clear the first objective. So, I recommend picking week 4 and week 5, or you could do week 5 and week 9, so on and so forth. Any combination of those 3 is perfectly fine, but you only need to do 2 of them. In Season 3, the first one is actually right off the bat. Week 3, 25,000, Week 5, 35,000, Week 7, 50,000, Week 8, 65,000, Week 11, 75,000, Week 12, 85,000, and finally Week 14 for 100,000. Now, as you can figure, there's a lot of different options you can choose. I would say the safest you can choose is the 65 on Week 8, the 75 on Week 11, and the 85 on Week 12. This will put you over the 250,000 fan count if you opted for the 2 auditions in Season 2 that were mentioned earlier. The others are not terrible, but some of them have some overlap with other auditions we'll talk about in a second. For Season 4, there's actually another handful. Starting from Week 3, there's a 130,000 fan option. Week 5, 145,000. Week 9, 12, and 13 all have 185,000, and lastly, Week 18 has 200,000. You're going to need at least 2 auditions to clear the final objective. I would personally recommend that if you're just going for 500,000, to go for Weeks 5 and 9. There's no major overlap between other auditions, and if you've been following the other recommendations, should get you over 500,000 with relative ease. Now, the other side of the coin here are the special auditions for abilities. So, as we were talking about, while you can get fan count, which is great, there are also auditions that grant you special abilities. Almost every single ability from these auditions are good, for various reasons. Some of which can be a little finicky to use, and they're not always recommended. If you're not sure which of these there are, definitely check out the S.T.E.P guide on the Shiny Colors wiki as well in order to keep track of all the names of specific auditions. The first major ability you can get from an audition is at the end of Season 2. The final audition is Rhythmic Diva, which requires you to be E rank or higher with your fan count, which, if you've been following the guide for 500,000 fans, should be something you've achieved before the end of the season. This bonus is a plus 2% to your appeal strength, which applies after everything as far as I understand it, making it a very strong effect to consider. For Season 3, there's a couple. The first one is not particularly good, which is Smile Arena, requiring a C rank fan count or higher, which is an appeal strength 10% up until you take damage. This is equivalent to Knock Chill abilities. This one can be okay for turn 1, but not every team uses this particularly well. If you are playing a team that can avoid damage consistently, then maybe it's something to consider for sure, but if that's not the team you're trying to play, then I would avoid it. The next one is Dreaming My Way. This again requires C rank or higher. This applies a plus 10% to your maximum appeal strength, depending on how low your mental is. So this applies sort of like the Antika Revenge factor. This is another really good one to consider. Most teams right now are going to be taking a lot of hits thanks to having high attention, and most of the time also having low mental. So grabbing this ability is actually really good. The next one is New Face. New Face has 3 different versions: Top Vocalist, Top Dancer, and Top Expresser. They require you to have a 500 or higher as your main stat. And remember, that's the top number, not the bottom number. So if you're building a vocal unit, then the plus 500 is where that comes into vocal. This provides you a plus 100 uncapped to the same stat as the audition. So if you were to participate in Top Vocalist and pass it, you would get a plus 100 to your maximum vocal stat. The same would then apply with Top Dancer. You would get a plus 100 to your maximum dance stat, and Expressor for the visual stat. The last audition of Season 3 is Love Letter No Answer, which requires C rank or higher on the fan count, which is a unit position bonus of 5%. That is really strong, because that applies all of the effects of positional bonuses. So this increases the effectiveness of passive activation rate for your leaders, this increases all of your appeal strength for vocal, dance, and visual, and it overall buffs your stats for the center. So this is a great ability to get basically no matter who you're building. Definitely check out that one at the end of Season 3. For Season 4, there are plenty, but the first one is maybe the first one that's not as good, but can still be fine, which is Nando Demo Uto, or Utao, which requires a fan count of B rank or higher. Again, if you've been following the fan count guide for the minimum 500,000, this should be no problem. This increases your appeal strength by 5% depending on how high your mental is, so this is an Alstromeria effect. If you're playing Alstro, great ability, pick it up every single time. If you're not playing Alstro, decide carefully. It's not something you're always going to want to grab, but it is something to consider at the very least. Top Start wa Ichi Kyoku Dake requires B rank or higher. In fact, the next one after this will also require B rank or higher, which is an appeal strength max 10% up based on what turn it is. So the longer that the performance takes, the stronger you're going to get. Very good ability. Most fests don't end necessarily that quick, especially in a meta where players are trying to play slower in order to activate more abilities to gain more points. So, being able to just get stronger as the turns increase is a good thing to consider for sure. Ryosei Star Ranking, again requiring a B rank or higher, is an appeal strength max 5% up based on how high your memory gauge is. So this is similar to something like a Koito or a Rinzai 2. Again, because there's no drawback to this, just having a higher memory gauge means that this is going to hit really hard, and it also applies to your memory appeal as if it was max strength. So, really, really good, especially for your center. Nanairo Utagasen, which requires now your memory level to be 2 or higher, is a 3% increase to your appeal strength. Very, very good. We already mentioned how Rhythmic Diva is great. This one is even better. Shukan Prison Memories requires, again, memory level 2 or higher, 2% to your appeal strength. Very good. And lastly, Top Songs, which requires memory level 2 or higher, is appeal strength 3% up. This one is also very good for all the same reasons. Sometimes people may prefer the final audition for the passive, but if you don't necessarily need it, then the appeal strength up, again, very good. Knowhow books can gain abilities from any produce mode as long as you meet the conditions for them to unlock. So things like your positional bonuses in grad, any of the bonuses like start dash, slow start, clearing special auditions in wing grant you special bonuses depending on the stat randomly. SP is gained from things like landing point for passing the final in landing point, which is also really good. The number of abilities you can get are finite, but there's also too many. So many produce modes have unique abilities or bonus tied to them specifically, meaning you'll more than likely be gathering abilities across several produce modes and countless runs in order to obtain what you're looking for. Don't be surprised if you have to dive into wing and landing point again after a long time just to gather some specific abilities. Now, these abilities are considered know-how, and know-how that are dropped from any produce run can range from levels 1 to 5. On top of this, certain more specific abilities have various qualities to their strength, represented with no mark, a plus mark, a double plus mark, and a triple plus mark. These will have the same level mechanic from 1 to 5. The higher the quality, the stronger the ability is. The higher the level, the more likely it will be the ability is inherited from your know-how brought into S.T.E.P. So, you gather up your abilities in one produce mode, then you hope that they drop at level 4 or 5. Then you take the book into S.T.E.P. and hope during somewhere between seasons 2 and 4, the ability pops up at the end of the season. That means you've inherited it. It's estimated by producers that the odds of inheriting a level 1 ability are around 10%, and increase by about 2 to maybe 3% per level, rounding out around 20% at level 5. A 10% increase from level 1 to level 5 is pretty big, so for many players it's recommended that if you're looking to get really strong and consistent, to try to gather as many level 5 abilities as you can. Level 4 is not a bad place to stop if you're just trying to get used to it, but ideally you should be looking for as many level 5 or level 4 abilities as you can. The gist is that abilities gained from other modes can be passed on to a S.T.E.P book, and you can combine several abilities together onto one S.T.E.P book and make it a bigger, better book. Then you can pass all of those abilities onto another book, and onto another book. Then you have 3 books that all have the same range of abilities, making it more consistent to gain them, so you can choose to add in more abilities, and stack them on top of each other to make an even bigger book. A single know-how book can carry upwards of 20 different abilities, so there are plenty of things you can stack onto any single book. Know-how books also have the stats. These reflect the stats gained from that produce run they were made in. The default know-how books provided by the game, if you haven't produced at all, have a range of plus 10 to plus 5. Technically, the weakest you can make a stat from a know-how book is plus 1, but you would have to do some very specific things to make that happen. The general gist of things in terms of how they get stronger is that every 200 points in a stat you earn in a produce run increases the value of a book by 10, starting at 101. So the next upgrade would be at 301 becoming plus 20, 501 would become 30, 701 is 40, so on and so forth. So, a great way to help make your idol really strong in S.T.E.P is to start with really high-statted books. So ideally, not only are you gathering a ton of abilities, but you're also using those ability books to gather a ton of stats. So that way you have a bunch of abilities on one book that also has a really high base stat count for the idol you're producing. It makes a difference when you start off with 3 level 10 books versus, say, starting off with 3 books that grant you 110. Or 100, or however many. Another major aspect to this, especially for making insanely strong idols, are know-how headers. These appear at the top of every know-how book. You have a guaranteed stat that applies to every book, which is referred to as the header. This header always starts out at a plus 10. But what it starts as specifically is completely random. It can be a +10 to either vocal, dance, visual, or mental, or it can be a +10 uncapped to the same stats, meaning you have a 1 in 8 chance by default of getting the main stat that you want, or a 1 in 4 chance of getting either the stat or stat uncapped, but ideally you're looking for the stat. When you complete a step run specifically, the game determines the header for your new book randomly, starting by rolling each of the base versions as previously stated, so that 1 in 8. But it also accounts for all the different headers you brought along to that produce run. So if you brought along a book that had a +10 vocal, a +10 dance, or a +10 dance uncap, those 3 now get added on as separate entries, making it a 1 in 11 chance. If you roll any of the 3 abilities that you brought specifically, they will be upgraded. So instead of being a vocal header, it will now be vocal header plus, or dance header plus. You can then roll that again in order to make it double plus, and you can upgrade this as far as a triple plus. The odds of this are very understandably low. You can try to swing the odds in your favor by having more copies of the same headers in order to try to get more possible chances for it to upgrade, but it's still not very easy and can take you a very long time to get the header that you're looking for. Sort of in the same vein, you have footers. Footers are unlocked from the seasonal objectives in S.T.E.P. So by clearing the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, you get 4 different versions of footers. These work the exact same way as headers, but because of the nature of trying to unlock them, it comes off as a bit more random. The main reason why you even care about upgrading your header and footer is that these will always activate at the end of Season 2, 3, and 4. So if you have 3 headers of, say, +50 in your stat, then that means that at the end of every season, you're getting a free 150 to your main stat. So that means it's an extra 450 by the end of the run. That's a lot of stats to consider. So being able to have that is really, really nice for making a really strong card. You may not see your footer abilities come up as often because they're at the same mercy rule as other abilities. So the odds of them unlocking are obviously not very good, but if they do, it just means that's more stats for you to potentially be getting. And as long as they appear, they're going to pop up on your step book at the end as well. So you can pass these on to make it easier for the next idol you choose to produce to gain those stats too. It takes a lot of time, and as you can figure, there's a lot that goes into it to making these cards particularly good. Let's talk about abilities. Obviously, there are a ton of abilities that you can get from every single mode. So I'm going to try to keep these relatively short, because obviously, this is going to be long. Of note, you can get Memory Knowhow Plus or Double Plus, which requires you to have Memory Level 5 in any produce run. This is a great ability to just have in the first place because it increases how much memory gauge you're getting, and that is always really good, especially if you're having trouble getting consistent memory appeals. So again, that happens if you hit level 5 memory in any produce run. Most players choose to farm this in TFD, specifically because level 5 memory is easiest to get in TFD. In Wing, every special audition, which is unlocked by reaching the fan count for the end of each season, can grant you a +20 to a random stat. So you could, in theory, get 4 separate auditions that grant you, say, +20 to that stat. So you could get a +20, +20, +20, +20. So you also now have a chance to, as mentioned with the headers earlier, get those stats, but also get the stats from the Wing auditions. And you would just be gathering oodles and oodles of stats at the end of every season, which is very good. Training event auditions also provide the same 20 in seasons 1 and 2. Again, the stat they choose is random, so you may have to find yourself doing these a lot when training events come up. However, of note, the Season 3 audition could grant you 20 SP, which is very nice, and the Season 4 audition grants you +3 affection towards your memory level. So you may find yourself participating in training events a lot in order to get these specific abilities to help make centers easier or just get more SP or more stats. For TFD, there are no specific ones that you can get outside of certain campaigns, same with Grad and Landing Point where they had unique campaign-related bonuses, but, as mentioned before, the Memory Knowhow is easiest to obtain here because TFD makes it easy to get level 5 memory. In Grad, Every single grad ability that isn't bond with an idol, so for example bond with mono, which is unlocked by spending 4 mono tokens specifically, those can be passed into a know-how book. So because of this, gathering up every major grad ability, so your positional bonuses, all-rounder, slow start, start dash, memory gauge high, memory gauge low, they're all really good to grab. In fact, for grad or any of the other modes, it's actually a pretty good idea to make a spreadsheet keeping track of every single ability you want to get, and if you've gotten, say, a level 4 or level 5 version, maybe even noting down which idol you got it with on which day, so that way you can keep track of your know-how books to figure out which ones you want to keep or possibly throw away later. Now for landing point, every single level 20 and level 40 song bonus can be passed on. So this means you can stack up more song bonuses here than you can in LP normally, which lets you pick up to 3 songs. You could have the effects of every single song on one idol, which is a huge stat bonus in something like Fes Tours. For most players though, the main reason they do landing point is for SP, SP+, or SP++, which requires you to win landing point by filling that voltage meter at the end. These grant you various levels of SP, with SP++ being a plus 50. Again, the fact that that can activate at the end of every season means that's more SP to spend on the abilities in your skill tree. The hell that is know-how grinding and merging. Let's talk about grinding for a little bit, since this obviously is something that you're going to have to do. Utilize the recently added feature to spend extra stamina for multiple runs when gathering know-how. This gives you 3 chances to roll the same abilities you gain in one run, saving you some time in the grand scheme of things. If you already know you're looking for just a certain subset of abilities, you're now essentially cutting down the time in a third to have 3 chances to get all of those possible abilities. As mentioned before, keeping a spreadsheet is absolutely really useful for keeping an eye out for abilities that you've gotten, want to get, so on and so forth. You might even track which ones you've already merged into specific books to cut down on the necessary grinding per se. As a note, don't expect this to be done in a day. The odds of any ability dropping is low, especially in the case of level 5 abilities. Many players have documented hundreds of runs before spotting the ability they were looking for, while others may find their abilities within a few hours. You never know. It heavily comes down to random chance, which is why a lot of people have written off step grinding in general, while others relish at the chance of getting all those sweet abilities in one good run. So take things at a pace that fits your needs specifically. When combining books together, plan on producing idols in step that you don't plan on using later. That lets you cycle through your books as you combine them without interrupting the flow of your ideal produce and support lineup. So always think about the final team and try to use things that have no relation to your final lineup. Make good use of training events as they pop up. They provide some unique stat bonuses through the special auditions and wing, but also make gathering certain abilities in grad easier. Of note, the stat uncap bonuses you can unlock in grad for having certain PR bonuses in blocks is a lot easier because they increase how much PR you gain. TFD, grad, and landing point also gain unique abilities to provide positional bonuses, which can be nice to have, even if it's a little hard to fit in for really strong books. And that more or less covers it. As you could figure, this video is really long, so if you've made it all the way to the end here, thank you so much for watching. This was clearly an endeavor to get through, and it's why I put off doing this for a long while, because there were so many things I was uncertain about, and it's just hard to do in some cases. For some players, step is this almost near insurmountable grind. For others, it's a big challenge to make some of the craziest cards you can make in comparison to things like grad. So, depending on how you feel about it, this mode is either a bane or a boon for you. Hopefully after the end of this, you can make a decision for yourself, and decide whether or not the mode and the grind that can be associated with it, but isn't mandatory, keynote there, is something worth your time. So, if you liked this video or found it helpful, make sure to like it, and make sure to leave a comment if you have any other details you think would be useful to other producers. Otherwise, good luck out there producing in step, good luck grinding up your abilities, and I can't wait to see your crazy teams in Grade Fest. Till the next video, I've been Cho, thanks for watching, have a wonderful rest of your day.